I'm going to call back up someone who you just saw, Dr. Zachary Rosenthal of the Duke Center for Misophonia and Emotion Regulation. And he's going to help us wrap up everything we've heard today, all of these perspectives, all of these highlights, but also all of the needs that we've identified, all of the gaps, and will not only give his own perspective, but also lead the conversation, a room-wide conversation to really think about now what actions do we need to take. And as I said, we're taking this information and we're going to use this to inform next steps and educational material. So what do we need to do from here? I'm going to turn it over to Zach.
It's okay, as long as I can access it. Okay, so, well, look at this production we've got happening here. This is lovely. Thanks again, guys, for sticking around this long and for everybody's insights, ideas, energy, opinions. Everything is welcome, and thank you. My job for this session is to help facilitate a conversation about strategies and solutions, and it's co-creating. So this is sort of a like us all together, right? As a community that can be intentional, trying to really think together, what can we all do together, right? So this, again, will really, the success will rely on all of us doing this together. Strategies, we think about strategies. I'll just help maybe get us started. Strategy is not the same as a tactic. Think of strategy, guys, as like what we need to do as a field, what we need to do to mount all of these different solutions. So strategies, think of as the what, the big picture, what we need to do. And then you can think of the tactics as like the how, the how do we do it? Like the more concrete, who does what and how, what does it look like? So this discussion can be at both levels, and it's really gonna be a success or not based on everybody's input. And I'm gonna facilitate that. I do have one slide. I do have one slide to show to help facilitate this. So I will do that now just to kind of get you thinking. Okay, so we think about who's here and what we're doing together. We have scientists and we have scientific research, and we are consuming science as clinicians and lay people. We're reading about it, hopefully. We're trying to make sense of it. And then as scientists, we're producing science to try to inform the field. So that's one piece of what we have to understand. But of course, we have clinical services. So how are we helping everybody, right? Let's think about that. We have clinicians here. And we, of course, also have what hasn't been talked about as much directly, so I'll label it as we need strategies for awareness and advocacy that are joint, co-created strategies with everybody in this room. A lot of what people are calling on as necessary can't really happen, in my opinion, without a really thoughtful strategy that involves actively trying to raise and build awareness and grow and build advocacy partnerships. And then we also have this kind of consideration around solutions and strategies that involves generating and sustaining the types of resources that are needed for this greater community. Resources to support, resources to direct, resources to house data, resources, and support, also support for families, support for loved ones, support for educators, support, right? So support differentiated here from clinical services. But in this model, what's missing? All these things are needed, but what's missing? Patient, and what are we using the term instead of the patient here? What are we talking about? Lived experience. Yeah. So we need to have centered in the middle of this, really the reason we're all here. Well, the reason we're all here is, oh, that's out of sequence. The reason we're all here is this in the middle. It's really that in what's intended to be a Duke blue heart. Somehow these squares look like the other Carolina, like the UNC. Not good, not good. But that's okay. So in the center of everything, we have lived experience, right? We have the people that live with and love, the people that experience this, that we're here to help. And everything connects to this. What I've kind of wanted to just put out as a visual for everyone here is just as we have this dialogue to think about if we center lived experience, we center our children, our partners, our parents, we center ourselves. If you are suffering directly, we center lived experience with a big heart right in the middle. And then everything else is related to that. Everything else. Does that help us think strategically? Right? Does that help us like actually think what do we need to do and in what order and then how? And then how? So I'm going to leave this up as we talk through some things together. I'm going to start with just a couple of ideas and a couple of thoughts generated from today. I was eavesdropping. I was walking around eavesdropping when you guys were talking about solutions. So if you recognize some of these solutions as yours, feel free to shout out, that's mine. And you can have first authorship on it. I don't claim any of these things. By the way, I don't claim any solutions. I don't think any of us actually knows what all the real answers are to all of this. The point is for us to be figuring out these things together. So the first thought in my mind that's really key with all of this strategically is how do we make anything sustainable in a way where we're inviting all of the people, all of the stakeholders that we think are important to the table? How do you build a sort of sustainable set of partnerships, right, with everyone? And who is everyone? Do we have everyone here in this room? That is everyone that's really part of what's needed to build a sort of longer term sustainable strategy? I'd say no, but I'm as I open it up, I'm going to be curious to hear what we think we need. And Kylie, who has centered herself on stage, you did not have to do that, is going to be taking notes as we get into what your thoughts are. So what we want to do is literally generate solutions together and jot them down where your solution can be heard, right? And can be noted, can be part of some thinking afterwards about what we do. I'm a behaviorist. We want to reinforce behavior. So that's what Kylie's here. Thank you, Kylie, for doing that. Okay, so this all costs a ton of money. How do we build partnerships? Right, we have to find ways to think about how to do this in a fiscally sustainable way. How do we do that? Right, we need probably some people who are not in this room to help us think through how we can do that together. Entrepreneurs are really good at that. There may be, I think there are some entrepreneurs. Adil mentioned he's an entrepreneur. I know Steve and Diane, entrepreneurs. Some of you are entrepreneurs, but I think we actually need entrepreneurial minds at the table that maybe aren't already invested in misophonia. Maybe just to help us think through what are we missing? You know, what kinds of ideas and models and methods and so on might we be missing here that could help us? Because so many of these things we all want really cost a lot of money. And truly, the research is really slow and it's expensive. So every idea we should have of this or we should study of that, super cheap and easy to say, super expensive and hard to actually do. So we need to be generating money. So yeah.
Also, to the same point, how can we leverage existing systems to try to tap into a little bit of the goals that have been discussed today? A lot of you are at clinics in university systems. What sorts of ways can we really start to lay the groundwork for what Zach is describing?
Emily?
All right, just to repeat myself. So I think at least in my demographic, what I'm seeing on social media, the types of conversations I'm seeing being had, I think there is actually a lot more attention on sensory issues more broadly, most specifically in the context of autism spectrum disorder is what I'm seeing. I'm not sure if any of you have seen that certain stadiums are creating sensory safe rooms with tools for folks that need them. We actually know that locally in North Carolina, there's some movie theaters that have partnered with our Center for Autism to create sort of an autism autism, sensory safe movie experience, which I know is something that a lot of folks with misophonia are unable to do, even though they would like to. So I'm thinking, how do we leverage the momentum that sensory issues more broadly is already gaining to shine a light on misophonia? And then in addition to that, I think it would be really interesting to consult some experts in public health who really focus on disseminating information, health information on a very large scale. Because ultimately, when we get more eyes and more attention pointed towards misophonia, odds are it's going to hit the hearts of a lot more people than we might expect. And those people might be resourced in a way that our community currently isn't. So I'm thinking about it more of a strategic approach. And I even think the story of this whole event is very unique and special. I think the community that we've built around misophonia research, clinical care, the lived experience, I think there's a real story there. So can we get the attention of the press? If it's not just directly about misophonia, is there more to the story that we can share and hopefully grab the attention of people that can really help? So those are just my initial thoughts.
Thank you, Emily. I think Adil had his hand up next.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I obviously don't know how, research is fully done, but I'm coming from the startup world. I'm wondering if we can bring in some of that 0 to 1 agile mentality and test a lot of hypotheses. Maybe it's in like 2-week sprints. Because a lot of these assessments and things, we can get online. Maybe we can form small groups and test things out and see what might be, like a lot of things out and see what might be most promising and rule things out and just, run with it. So instead of waiting 2 years and $500,000 and so.
Yeah, it's exactly a part of what I'm envisioning by bringing entrepreneurs to the table. You get a fast fail type of mentality, and that can really be helpful. I love that idea. I don't know your name, but you had your hand up.
Ariel. I'm coming at this as a digital mental health researcher that does not know a lot clinically about misophonia, but I have misophonia. I think that there's a ethos in digital mental health research of putting things up, doing quick trials, and doing a bigger population-based kind of approach to treatment research. And I think that from what I've gathered, I haven't seen much research on misophonia that has more than like 100 people in it. So I think it would be really interesting to think about how we could test brief digital interventions for misophonia. They can be made really quickly, test different treatment targets, and test different mediators and moderators, and get so much more data to kind of both build the clinical knowledge, because we don't know for sure what works the best yet. We wouldn't be putting any of this online saying it's a gold standard treatment approach, but it could both get resources out to people now who need them and test different approaches at the same time. So if anyone wants to talk about digital mental health and single session interventions, please come talk to me. I work in the lab for scalable mental health here at Northwestern, and kind of want to do some side projects in misophonia land. So
Okay. I love that.
Jessica Schleider is my mentor. So yeah, would love to connect, and she would totally support this.
Ditto. We would love to talk to you. I love the idea. Between you and Adil, we've got like the makings of exactly this idea of putting things together rapidly and figuring out what might work as a strategy. This is excellent. Any other thoughts while we're on this particular point? Oh, yes.
To some of the stories that we have just heard and what people think needs are. Most of the research that I heard about today and that I have also read about is quantitative and descriptive of more what misophonia is and the characteristics. And I guess I'd like to see more qualitative research, ethnographic research that tells the stories of people and families that have experience with misophonia. I read good descriptions of CBT and how helpful it is, but no stories of those people that are actually going through it.
Mhm.
and what has worked for them and what hasn't. So I guess I'd like to see more qualitative research that describes more treatment and even anecdotal cures,
Mhm.
because I have read and heard about cures
Mhm.
and there it lies without any more descriptive information or
Mhm.
distinct information.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful ideas. We're getting, yes, Mary. Oh, you got
Yeah,
getting
I-
steps in, Lauren. Yeah.
So this came to me while I was listening to, I think you said, can we jump into the sensory bandwagon? And so one of the things that I noticed today, because I think, yes, how can we tap into that larger sensory thing right now, is that every single person who talked about misophonia, I went to the bathroom 4 times, so maybe I missed you. If you did this when I wasn't here, mentioned context. I mean, every single speaker. Yet, when Dr. Ward had his visual with these layers of context, it stopped at social context. And where's the environment? Where is the larger physical context? And I feel like if we want to dive on to the stadiums and the grocery stores and what they're doing for people, we need to alert the world to the physical context, and we need to move beyond psychology's social definition, really, social context to other contexts. And just an observation. So I started thinking about this early in the day and I tested this out. And I mentioned to people with misophonia, to 3 people, do you think we should include the environment? And they're like, oh, context, yes, the environment. And then I mentioned to researchers in psychology and neuroscience, do you think we should include the environment? And they're like, yes, but maybe. And I think why not? So I really don't understand, why we can't expand that. And I think if we did, it would help people see misophonia also as a disability. So I do think the definition and the way we think about it and all these charts and graphs, and right from the beginning, we have so many assumptions that are going into the language we use and the concepts we make that we're kind of missing, like words like, is it an interpersonal problem, or is it a problem that causes interpersonal problems, et cetera? What is context? Is it the environment? Is it just people? So I guess that's my comment. And
Thank you.
if we could take on the neurodiversity bandwagon, we have to use the larger environment.
Thank you. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more about the role of context and thinking through what actually is, what do we mean by that? Right? We need to actually outline what the different components of context are, because they are many, many, many things. If something is everything, it suddenly becomes nothing. So we have to really kind of make sure that we're describing it in a way that's useful and can be. And do I sound like one of those psychologists that's saying yes, but? I hope I don't. I actually just mean like there's a way to do it that might be thoughtful. Okay, good. I want to bring us back to the question that I asked, though, where we're kind of veering into research. We're veering into kind of research considerations, which is absolutely wonderful. I want to bring us back to them thinking about how do we build strategies to be sustainable. And I want to bring us back centering to lived experience in the heart and the center of this. And one of the things that I want to say, and that I want to get your ideas about concretely, is that we don't really have a model in the United States. I'm looking at you, Jane. I know what's going on over in the UK, and you're welcome to share that as well. But here in the US, as we do research, we don't actually have a really clear, sustainable, lived experience infrastructure that sits at the centerpiece of understanding really complicated conditions. We just don't. We don't really have that. And so from a strategy perspective, if we situate the lived experience, which brings us qualitative, it brings us the ethnographic, it brings us ideas about context that are driven from people who really, really, really get it day to day, moment to moment. But to do that, I think we probably need to have a structure, a lived experience type of sustainable structure. Chris, Edwards, director of So Quiet, described. Ooh, I'm going to stand still. I have to stand still. Sorry, Zoomers. Sorry, I have a tendency to wander. I'm standing still. Chris, from So Quiet, the other day mentioned an idea that for me really resonated on this point, which was if we think about the complexity, the diversity, and really the unknown diversity of the lived experience, the representation of those with misophonia, could we create a lived experience advisory structure that's sustainable that, and Chris, I'm going to just, I hope this is okay to say you said this. I thought it was a great idea. It was to sort of have a House of Representatives style analogy, a House of Representatives style kind of model where we're thinking about if we take our very best guess that we can imperfectly, yes, imperfectly, but still the very best we have guess at what do we think about from representative population level studies of misophonia, which by the way, there's several of them now in different parts of the world. If we take the kind of demographic representativeness there, or we sort of figure this out from other vectors, maybe of other research methodologies, can we create a lived experience structure that represents everybody? And that lived experience structure becomes a place to go to get information and to give information that accurately represents the diversity across this House of Representatives of lived experience across this whole kind of model. So Quiet in the US, So Quiet has a lived experience advisory panel, which is wonderful. I'm a part of So Quiet. It's wonderful, but it's just actually, when you break it down and say, what is it actually? It's actually just a few people, several people here in the room and online. It's a few people who are willing, really generously willing to individually give ideas back to researchers. This is really good, really, really great. But can we say that those ideas really represent everybody? I don't think so. I don't think so. If we have a larger kind of structural type of resource, from my perspective, that's a really important centerpiece to this co-creating solutions puzzle. Again, I don't pretend to have all the answers, but to me, that feels like something that's a good type of tangible next step that could facilitate a lot on this slide. Yes.
I'm Jennifer Goldman, mother of a daughter with misophonia. And I don't know if you exactly asked a question, but you were talking about something that is a small tactic that I've had in mind for the last few hours, which is just about how you all who are doing research are recruiting participants. It just seems like there's a lot of fertile ground there, and the recruitment of participants, there can be a two-way street, right? Like as a mom, we were searching around and we really would have, I don't know, somehow we didn't come across Duke as a first pass find. And maybe if there had been Duke on social media recruiting participants, maybe that would have come across, our space faster or something like that. So I don't have any answers other than to say there's something there, and I've only been thinking about it for like an hour and a half. So
yeah, a type of there are some lists of people who are willing to participate. So Quiet has a list of studies that you could participate in. You need to go there to that website to see it. And there is a kind of a type of participant registry where if you want to be involved in studies, you can add your name. And other people, I think, have versions of this. We have our own kind of version of that internal to our center. But what I would ask from everybody here is what do you think about this idea as a concrete tactic towards the broader strategy of having a lived experience kind of infrastructure, if you will, that represents ideally everyone with misophonia, not just some people, but everyone. What do you think? Is that a terrible idea? Is it a good idea? How do we do that? Did you have your hand up? Yeah, go for it.
I do have an audiology voice, but I don't know if it's loud enough for Zoom. But one thing that I'd see is because of the overlap between some of the comorbidities here in the autistic populations, or someone who has misophonia and hyperacusis, or some of those overlaps of having more language that we can use together to talk about decreased sound tolerance as a whole. And it doesn't mean that it's just hyperacusis or just misophonia or just like sensory sensitivities. But if we could find a way to talk about that, it would get the message out there to somebody who might know that they're on the autism spectrum, but don't know this is a separate condition they could get help for, or somebody who has misophonia and doesn't realize that there's also things for their hyperacusis. So I think whether that's through social media or connecting researchers and across fields like this, but finding a way that we can all be more public about this terminology so that we can access more individuals with lived experiences and have the services there for them, rather than having them to find us through their own research or scrolling or whatever it is.
Mhm. 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 Yeah. And who makes those resources? Who gets to decide, right? And who houses them? How are they managed? These are just things we have to think about as a we. Yeah.
Yeah, just following up on Courtney, I'm just looking at the autism world and the funding opportunities there, and you're probably aware of the recent ARIA, which is Aligning Research to Impact Autism initiative. It's pretty large scale and it comes from a very entrepreneurship, perspective. It's a foundation that's funding it, and they're having RFAs for 3 separate things, and in a very structured, phased way. So they have a call out for impact network core sites. These are sites that are harmonized. So they have the same data collection, the infrastructure to really run clinical trials at scale. And feeding into those network core sites are what they call frontier hub sites. And these are meant for more targeted, promising clinical research that happens all over. It's not necessarily at these sites. And a third RFA for patient community collaborators. And the goal is that this happens in a phased way. And they are all kind of talking to each other eventually. Now, they just started this. I don't know how successful it is, but it also could be a resource that we could use. So because they're creating this really large clinical research infrastructure that is unprecedented.
We're not letting it go away from this table, is what we're saying. So now, Jeff, you're next.
Jeff, you're next.
Um,
Ready?
So it triggered some thoughts in my mind. So one of the things we know, those of us who do fMRI research or MRI research, is that it's very, very expensive. So right now I have to pay $700 an hour to get 1 hour, right? So funded by MRF, we have completed a study with 93 participants. I know there are centers in Canada have completed different studies, in United States, different studies, but even these are still small sampled compared to, let's say, studies on autism. Right? There will not be the level of funding specific to misophonia there as there would be for autism. That's just the reality. So one thing that I have been thinking about is how do we consolidate or pool our data together post-study, let's say, like if we were to do upfront with the same sequences, the same data acquisition parameters, it makes it easier. But the good news is that there has been a lot more work in machine learning and a lot more work that can harmonize the data collected perhaps somewhat differently in different MRI scanners in different places with slightly different parameters, but we can still harmonize the data and still leverage it. So my study of 90 participants with 5 other studies now becomes a study with 500 participants, right? And it's very challenging to do brain imaging with the diversity that we would like. So if we are saying we're collecting stories and information from 5,000 participants, it's very unlikely that that can be translated into brain imaging. So if we were to look at neural mechanisms, that is a huge, huge roadblock. So what I would like to see, hopefully in the near term before I retire or something, it is not like, what I would like to really, really see is that can we pull these together? There are not very easy solutions that exist currently because it takes a lot of effort to do this work after a project is over. So this is a lot of work post. You've published those papers, you have the primary data set, you've done as much data mining as you can in that one site. But if you were to pool this, that's a completely different thing. But that would be my dream thing, my dream.
Okay, so things are getting expensive quick. Of course. Yeah, no, that's that's not to shoot it down. It's just to recognize the realities. Got to think through how to make it sustainable. How do you build this kind of data architecture, this shared set of databases, and so on and so forth? Maybe this mechanism is a way to be thinking about it. What's the fund? Do you know the cost or the amount awarded for this, just by chance? Oh, they have money, I've heard. Yeah.
Directed and it's partly to push things into action faster than
Yeah.
the NIH.
Nice. Yeah. Do we have people on Zoom that want to contribute maybe to this conversation who haven't had a chance to yet? Let's see if the Dr. Brout is still with us.
And if not, Selena, perhaps you can look in the chat.
Not-
And Dr. Brout did have to go a little
Oh,
bit
okay.
early. So
She
yeah.
is not with us. Okay. Other ideas while we're waiting for Zoomers. Other ideas on this point. Sam.
Yes.
Want to run?
Thanks so much. I've been keeping pretty quiet just because I've been really interested in all the dialogue that's been going on. But just sort of wanted to add one comment, starting with sort of like an analogy, I guess. There's a city in Europe where individuals wanted to build bike lanes. And the individuals interested in building bike lanes are a relatively small community. So what they realized they had to do was change the incentives, really. They had to get other people on board with the incentives. So instead of, oh, build bike lanes for us because, we like cycling, the roads will be quieter. You'll have more space because so on and so on. And I wonder if similar ideas could be adopted here, where sound and shared sensory spaces are something that affect a lot of people. Of course, not as severely as people in the lived experience community of misophonia, but you could frame it as, are there ways that we can change shared sensory spaces to benefit people in other ways? Can we introduce technology and prostheses that are going to help remove sounds that other people might not like, but at the same time, actually, you're achieving more than you would do if you weren't including these extra incentives? I don't know if I phrased that great, but yeah. Sure. I've just invented universal design.
There are people who are maybe in this room who aren't speaking up about this, but I think probably there's lots of people who are not in this room who have expertise in these kinds of fields and these methods, and we need to bring them into this community to help think through exactly those kinds of different ideas. 100%. Is there no, somebody had their hand up?
2 online though.
Oh, good.
Actually, one of the questions goes right with that, with who should we be bringing into these conversations? And so one of the questions, have we tapped into the neuropsychologist population and pediatrician population for screening, research participation, education, community resources, and dissemination?
That is a great question. That is, I know at our center, Grace spends a lot of time reaching out and has a database of every single national and state organization, pediatrics, audiology, mental health of every discipline, and reaches out and is on the third cycle through, just proactively trying to engage. And that's one of the strategies we're using. But the short answer is I don't think there's any pediatricians in this room, or they're very quiet. So no, these are people who need to be at the stakeholder conversation table. It's a great point.
And another question that goes right on top of that is, can we target our advocacy efforts better to reach people who have the lived experience to cover all of these bases?
Yeah, I don't have to be I guess I have the microphone, so I can respond easiest here. I think that's another great suggestion. I think from my perspective, it is probably valuable for us to have a pool, a source, a diverse structure that is set in place for people of lived experience, lived experiences, who can be a source to turn to do exactly that, and to help us think through how exactly do we do that. We have to it's been mentioned here before, but just to like put an underline on it, and maybe a little bit more of a provocative way, that was said, I think, by Tiffany much more gently earlier. Most of what we, quote, know about misophonia, including really every single study we've done at Duke, I think that's true. Just about not every, but just about every single study, most of what we know, so to speak, scientifically, we only really sort of, kind of, a little bit know, and it's only really with some people, and those people are certain people. They're women. They're not girls even. They're women. They're definitely not boys or men. They're not non-binary, and they tend to be educated. They tend to have resources, and they tend to be white. And I am married to a white educated woman. It's not a critique of white educated women. It's just to say everybody else needs to be brought into this whole dialogue and conversation in a really thoughtful way. I think only from doing that do we start to be able to do what this really, I think, very good comment is suggesting. Otherwise, we end up with kind of in a recurring cycle, we kind of keep testing hypotheses or generating ideas that are really only targeting a very important, but only one sub sample of the broader who's in the middle of that heart. Any other questions online?
So this isn't really a question, and I don't really know how to phrase it eloquently, so I'll try my best. As somebody with lived experience, I can appreciate that researchers want to work until they come up with the ultimate answer. I feel that there's maybe I just don't know where to look for this, but somebody who's had it for, 15 years, it's a lot of trial and error in my day-to-day life of what's going to make it manageable for me. And a database of, have you tried this at the movie theater? Of people saying like, yeah, upvote, I love this. This is great. This worked for me too. Or that didn't work for me, but this worked for me. And then when the clinicians don't know the answer of, this therapy is not working, but in the meantime, while we get you to that point, here is something that can get you to the next day.
I love that. And I would imagine most people listening and here love that idea, because one thing I think we can say we do know, because it's not that we know nothing, it's just that we got to be careful with how confident we are with what we think we know. One thing I think we can say with some confidence is that there's tremendous variability. There's tremendous variability in what this experience is, and what the expression of it is, and how people day-to-day function, and what works and what doesn't work, and why and how, and so on. To move forward, we do need, I think it's a great idea very tactically to have some kind of accessible, structural, public-facing, transparent type of interface that aggregates that kind of information and allows people to sort through what they think about it. And Smaller versions of this are here and there on various individual websites, but what I think you're describing in a much more representative way is a really good idea in terms of thinking about resources and support in that box. Clinicians too could add to this. You know, I'm a clinician as well. Clinicians, we don't do, and Mike made this point earlier, I'll underline it, we don't do the same thing with each person. I mean, that's kind of a cartoon. It's not the same thing with there's no way you can realistically do that. It's like logically not even possible if you actually think it through. But beyond the logical argument, everybody's different. And time affects misophonia and context affects misophonia. Biopsychosocial processes affect misophonia, and they do differently for different people, different time points and different contexts, and it gets complicated quick. So therapists, as clinicians and therapists are working with patients to see what works, they could also add, they could also contribute to this, designated as from their perspective. But not as a brand. I would just, since I have the mic, I would editorialize probably not as a brand, right? Because brand oversimplifies, and brands are subject to conflict of interest. Brands are brands, but what's inside of the brand is what really makes the treatment work. It's how do you actually apply it for that person. So thinking that from that perspective, what's actually working from your perspective, patient's perspective, clinician's perspective, parents' perspectives. Yeah, love it. Love it. I have another suggestion for resources and support. And this is not a new idea or my idea, but this is an idea that I think, I'm curious what you all think. And this was sort of highlighted a little bit earlier today, so bring it back, the idea that we have a definition of misophonia on the one hand, but on the other hand, we also don't really know truly what misophonia is. It's an interesting space we're in. We've defined it, but we don't actually really know what it is. And by the way, who's the we that defined it? It's researchers. It wasn't a lived experience consensus definition, right? It was research focused. There's some people who are researchers have misophonia also, so it's not like it's either or. But I would argue that part of what we need in these kind of strategies and solutions together is to have a kind of round two, a next version, an updated consensus definition that, yes, integrates all of the published research, yes, does do that, but also brings other voices to the table that maybe aren't researchers, and not maybe, that are not researchers, right? To bring together a variety of different people. And it's complicated to do that, but it's worth doing. I don't know that we would have a tremendously different result. I don't know what you all think. I don't think we would have a radically different definition, but I do think there would be there'd be some important additions, deletions, there'd be some important nuances if everybody came to the table to do this. So what do you all think about that as a type of resource that is necessary to help us all move forward together? Couple head nods.
I love that idea. I wonder if setting up the infrastructure for citizen science might be a good way to go about it. So that's where you give the power to the people with lived experience to design and maybe even implement studies at scale, or even for questions like this, definition.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Citizen science. Do you want to say more about, you want to say just another word or two or a sentence or two about that? What that would look like?
So citizen science in the last 10 years has become, something that is caught fire in terms of the size of the population that contributes to science. So this could be, in general, very ad hoc folks sharing their wearable biometric data, which happens all the time informally, but also now consolidated into very high impact science. It has some ethical regulatory challenges, but has been overcome. So there have been, I think, in the domain of some health outcomes, people freely sharing lots of information and data in a completely voluntary way that takes sample sizes from 100 to 100,000. So, but it would be cool to just set up the infrastructure to almost have that as self-sustaining, if you will.
Who's ready to become a citizen scientist? I like it. I like it. I like it. Other ideas on this point? Thoughts? Lauren, sorry to send you over there again. Grace has her hand up.
I agree with including different stakeholder groups in a new consensus definition. And I think that we should get to be clinicians, researchers, people with lived experience, but making sure that there's a diverse sample of each of those groups. And with the lived experience, having people who have it and having that be a diverse group with ages, ethnicity, symptom variability, but then also including parents who see their kids experience it and have other viewpoints that maybe we don't see ourselves. And then same with clinicians and researchers, getting people from many different disciplines and very different experiences so we can get a wide range of viewpoints to get a more broad definition that represents the greater population.
Thank you, Grace. Emily has her hand up. You don't have to go very far.
Well, actually, just another idea. I think it would be really wonderful for MRF to do this, and maybe other journals could join in too, but making sure that the science that we do put out is accessible for the lived experience community, having a very language friendly summary of key takeaways, but then also what this means for you. Maybe even an alert system or providing instructions for how to sign up for an alert system when there are new publications, and just making sure we're really careful with our language, what we can conclude from studies, what we can't, which is, I know, really important, as we always talk about. But yeah, just making sure that we're really making it easy to digest, because there is so much information out there that people just aren't understanding how to read and interpret and apply to their own lives. And ultimately, I think what everyone wants to know is, what can I do now to make it better? So I think that would be a really wonderful addition on the research side of things for us to do as scientists.
I'm so glad you mentioned that, Emily. And this is a plug actually for if you are not signed up for our newsletter, please do. But we have something that will be coming out soon, which will be the Misophonia Research newsletter. And it will be exactly that, just taking the latest discoveries, latest research, and distilling it down into accessible bites, and we'll go out in a newsletter. So if you are not signed up on our newsletter, please do. That's a great idea.
Okay, I'm still thinking about participation and recruitment, and I'm thinking not only about recruiting participants to studies, but also recruiting researchers and recruiting clinicians. I have no idea. I mean, it's just such a fertile, open field. It's like so exciting. I don't know what you're already doing to do these things. So that's a question that I'm sure is not easily answerable in a short period of time, but I'd love to know, and also just say whatever you're doing, if we could put more resources against really recruiting far and wide, because as an organizational psychologist myself, I entered a field where there was not a lot of openness. It's a field that's been being researched for many, many years, and that has its own set of exciting things and also challenges. But for young budding researchers, this is just an open space.
I hate to beef up capitalism, but I think you have to include lived experience in the financial structures. So if we want people with lived experience to participate in the consensus definition, do that kind of work, pay them. So, and people who traveled here for as part of a university, probably their school paid for it. Or some of you maybe, no money for researchers to go to conferences, but things like Well, okay, I feel better. But that kind of thing, you know, paying people with lived experience to be part of a research team, not just your volunteer time, but a little stipend or something. Okay, yeah.
Chris, are you raising your hand or scratching quizzically?
Don't actually. But I mean, a part of it is awareness. Like we're here as part of the Misophonia Research Fund, which is the organization in the world that funds misophonia research, which is incredible. What we have done just in the 5 years it's been around is incredible. I'm guessing if once the ICD is approved, there will be a watershed moment where there will be other organizations that might also fund it, right? Which would be kind of cool. If you're researching diabetes, there's probably multiple places you can apply for funding for diabetes or something like that. So we're at a weird time right now. I don't know much about. I'm not a scientist, so I don't know much about what would bring on some more of those resources to help expand it. Maybe you could help me.
I'm not sure the scientists are the ones to answer that question best, to be perfectly blunt with you. I think that's part of thinking about these bigger structures and partnerships and how do we engage in literal entrepreneurs who know how to do this sort of thing. And that's, yeah, people who are scientists might be good at that and should be at the table, but not the only ones, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, yes, that is what we need, right? We just need more funding directed to misophonia, more awareness. The awareness hopefully will bring more funding. The understanding of the epidemiology and just how many people are impacted by misophonia more than other disorders that get more funding and more attention will hopefully also. And then, you know, outreach at different levels by different organizations that can really advocate for, let's say, federal funding directed towards misophonia. This is a difficult time, obviously, with federal funding, but certainly there's other philanthropies also that may be interested. And so partnerships, I think, are really important.
I have an idea. It's not about research, about more about clinical practice. Maybe we can write a letter, maybe we're so quiet, to universities and schools that are providing training in psychotherapy, explaining how important it is, although it's not still included in official diagnostic criteria, how important it is to learn about it, that we have already data, some data on prevalence, lots of data about characteristics. Obviously, we don't know what misophonia is exactly, but well, what we know about other disorders. So maybe we can write it, and then professors from these fancy universities, American universities, can sign it, and that will, you know, it will be very validating. And then we translate it to many languages, including Polish. And then we send it to those schools, universities, at least something. I mean, maybe because it's not in the program. Students, we don't learn about it. Students don't learn about misophonia. Psychotherapists are finishing their programs and they have no idea about misophonia. Why then they're meeting the people and they sending them away. So maybe let's write a letter. Chris, what do you think?
Thank you, Marta.
Yeah, no, I just want to raise attention to there is something called the Autism Impact Fund, and that's I mean, it's a venture capital fund that funds private startups it's not just autism, it's like a lot of neurodivergent stuff. So whether, I don't know, if we can build something that's miso inspired but helps a wider audience, maybe we can pitch to them or start our own seed fund.
It's such a good strategy. We've heard a couple of really good ideas thinking about that at a high level, how to partner with and leverage to the best we can partnerships with existing larger infrastructures that have calls for funding or have funding. It's a great idea. I think it's a terrific idea. And I think it'd be nice to generate an actual list. Thank you for being really concrete about this is the particular place and you as well with a very specific RFA. I think that's actually what we need is we need to kind of move beyond thinking broadly and get really concrete. Which organizations do we think are the best ones to partner with? I think we as a field are at a place where we could do this type of thing and approach. It's not 5 years ago and it's not 10 years ago. And the science really, if you look at graphs of scientific productivity, it is going like this, and it's getting more and more rigorous. It's of course, the more you know, the less you know. It's one of those things. We are learning what we don't know all along the way. But I do think it's very different today than it was not so long ago in terms of what we can argue we think we might know and the relevance and the impact of this kind of work broadly. I like it. Unless there's another hand, I have another seed to drop in here. Okay, so I'd like to know what you all think from all perspectives in the room. If you could generate a list for the purpose of, well, I suppose it really could be in any or all of these 4 boxes. If you could generate a list of best practice guidelines, suggestions for best practices for this or that, whether it's a research-based practice or it's a clinical-based practice, or whether it is an awareness or advocacy or support or resource hosting best practice, what would that list, what would be on your list? And just if this isn't clear to some of you, an example might be something like a type of best practice guideline for assessment measures. There are a lot of different psychometrically validated assessment measures, and 5 years ago, there weren't. There were some, but they weren't really quite scientifically validated. Now there's a whole bunch. Now it's almost confusing. Which one do you choose and why and how, right? So that's just to give you an example of what I mean. I think there needs to be a kind of best practice guideline for clinicians and for everyday people who are wondering, do I have misophonia? Does my child have misophonia? Which questionnaire do I fill out? And how do I make sense of it? And so on. So a best practice kind of white paper type of deliverable could be, I think, quite useful. And of course, the corollary to this is a best practice type of treatment paper. But beyond those two, what do you all think? What would be at the top of your wish list to help support strategies that are needed to really galvanize all of this and move us to the next level?
I would like to see a packet put together that I could distribute to my kids' schools and even beyond that, because when we started this process of getting an IEP and just any kind of assistance for my kid, people had no idea what misophonia was. And we know that that's really common. But to not have the people in the school who are, and there has to be more than one kid at my school who has, my kid's school who has misophonia. They don't even know. So, you know, having like a school gathering where they could put on a video to show people like, hey, this is what misophonia is like, and do you recognize that in yourself?
Thank you. That's a great suggestion.
Just add, as a clinician, we have to, I hope we can be aware of when we're spreading awareness that we are careful with how, I think a lot of the younger generation can easily see it as, then I have this thing that's a fixed thing in me, and over-identify with it. And I've had those teens come to me where they're like, oh my gosh, I'm allergic to these sounds. I can't, my body can't. And they actually do all these things with that belief that further entrenches them in the issue. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, the awareness a little bit. So we just need to be, yes, this is real, and there are things you can do to manage it and get to a better place. So.
I wanted to add something. I think after the school board comment, I wonder if we can, create some competition and FOMO amongst maybe private schools or any business that requires, more people, because private schools are super capitalist businesses. If we can kind of create some competition and say, hey, this school is more neurodivergent friendly than the other, that can, I don't know what it could do, but it could, hopefully spread good things like wildfire.
Best practices on inciting competition. I like it. I like it. Yeah. Selena?
Went from online.
Good.
Yes, we have some suggestions from online. Beyond, of course, multidisciplinary approaches to care, validated questionnaires for adults and pediatrics, like you've mentioned, being honest with people with lived experience. There's two really great suggestions for best practices. There's one, and from two individuals, and that's consistent education in the community and for support for families and including family education in this.
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. Each one of these kind of best practice guidelines takes a group of stakeholders from diverse perspectives to get together and think it through and really work it through. I'm pretty sure we could find some motivated families who would want and be helpful in thinking this through. I'm very sure of it. Some in the room nodding their head right now at me. Yeah, yeah. What else? We have a clock that's
I think
ticking.
that may be off. I think we have maybe just a.
Oh, I'm 17, 16,
Oh, okay.
15. I was going to try squeeze in one more, but maybe not. I won't. Okay, so Lauren, do we want to wrap up then for this session?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Zach, for leading us in that discussion. I think it was just so insightful and all the information. Thank you, Kylie, for noting all of that. We are going to take this information. This is not stopping here, right? So we are going back in our partnership, and we're going to take this information, and it's going to continue. So thank you to all of you, but thank you, Zach, for leading us through this.
I also just want to add that the conversation doesn't have to end here. So if you didn't make a comment that you think of later, feel free to email us.
Thank you, Kylie. All right. So with that, we have actually reached the wrap up of our presentation today. First of all, before we go on, raise your hand if you met someone new today. Wow. Raise your hand if you learned something new. And raise your hand if you learned something that you think you can now take back and share with someone else or implement in your own life. For those online who can't see, it's just an overwhelming raising of hands for each of those questions. And I think that's a true testament to the conversation that was started here today. And yes, this was only started, again, beyond you taking this information and sharing it, we are not done. And so us as a steering committee with Duke and So Quiet and the Misophonia Research Network, we are going to take this information. And so we just, again, want to thank all of you. First of all, thank you to our speakers and moderators who made this possible. We are eternally grateful for you coming out and giving us these stellar presentations today. Thank you to everyone in the room and everyone online. Your engagement and thoughtfulness and sharing your perspectives was just so critical to the success of this event. Again, I'd like to give a big thanks, and I don't know, Steve or Dan, if you want to say a few words, that's completely fine. Yeah, okay. Oh.
I want to say thank you to you, Lauren, that all of this would not have happened without you. So thank you.
Well, it takes a team, and I think that's going to be true of solutions for misophonia. It's a team, and it's a team here that we've built. So really looking forward to next steps. Please look out because you will hear from us. There is an exit survey. So let's see. Okay. We would love you to capture your feedback before you leave the room. So if you want to take a picture of that QR code and give us your thoughts. This is the first time this event has happened. We have not put this on together. We've not put this, they're in virtual versions, but in person and hybrid, and especially this format has not happened before. So we'd love to hear from you. And again, thank you for coming out today.